The difference between fiction and nonfiction is authenticity. Fiction springs largely from the author's imagination. An idea, question, or incident in the real world may give rise to a work of fiction, and the setting and even many details may be verifiable, but the plot comes from the workings of the mind. All the evidence and facts presented in nonfiction books can be verified. If any part of the book is fiction, the whole work is categorized as fiction. Nonfiction books are classified as biography and informational. Biography and autobiographies tell the story, or at least part of the story, of the actual person's life. A memoir is an autobiography that focuses on a specific period in the author's life. Informational books are called nonfiction in adult publishing. Most popular children's choice books between 1985 and 1995 were realistic fiction, including Shiloh, Maniac McGee, and Hatchet. Three main categories of contemporary fiction, realistic fiction, are becoming one's own person, coping with the problems of human condition, and living in a diverse world. Contemporary fiction can serve as a mirror to reflect ourselves and a window on the world. What do you think is the most popular book genre that children choose today? Why? Because of Winn-Dixie. Opal, the main character, moves to Florida with her father. At the grocery store, she picks up a stray dog that she names Winn-Dixie, and who becomes her new best friend. Opal and Winn-Dixie show young readers the importance of friendships, forgiving people, and giving them a second chance. Missing May. For 6 years now, Uncle Ob and Aunt Mary have provided the family orphan Summer, now 12 years old, with the best home she has ever known, giving her love that does not have to be earned or repaid, the development of self-esteem, and the freedom to explore nature and her own feelings. Then suddenly her beloved May dies, and Uncle Ob seems to devote his life to mourning. This young girl experiences grief as well, but gradually realizes that her uncle is turning his back on life itself. She will be an orphan again if she cannot inspire him with the will to live. Terrified that something would happen to Uncle Ob, Summer finally confides her fears and helplessness to Cletus, an odd neighbor boy. When Ob claims that he feels May's spirit hovering nearby, he becomes motivated to contact her, to receive a last blessing, as it were, and put emotional closure on their lost relationship. These three psychic pilgrims undertake a short odyssey of spiritual growth to locate a medium who can help them transition through the grieving process. Rules. 12-year-old Catherine just wants a normal life, which is near impossible when you have a brother with autism and a family that revolves around his disability. She spent years trying to teach David the rules, from a peach is not a funny-looking apple to keep your pants on in public, in order to head off David's embarrassing behaviors. But this summer, Catherine meets Jason, a surprising new sort of friend, and Christy, the next-door friend she's always wanted. It's her own shocking behavior that turns everything upside down and forces her to ask, what is normal? The View from Saturday. 4 6th graders are chosen by their teacher, Mrs. Olinsky, to be the class representatives for the academic bowl team. When the team goes on to perform amazing feats of intellect, including winning the state championship, people keep asking Mrs. Olinsky how she chose the participants. Although the questioners never get a real answer, the story told from different perspectives lets readers in on the secret. Did Mrs. Olinsky choose the team, or did they choose her? Bud, Not Buddy. 10-year-old Bud, a motherless boy living in Flint, Michigan during the Great Depression, escapes a bad foster home and sets out in search of the man he believes to be his father, the renowned bandleader Cab Calloway. Wanting More. Jamila lives with her mother and father in Afghanistan. Despite the fact that there's no school in their poor war-torn village, and though Jamila lives with a birth defect that has left her with a cleft lip, she feels relatively secure, sustained by her unwavering faith and the strength of her beloved mother, Moore. But when Moore suddenly dies, Jamila's father impulsively decides to seek a new life in Kabul. Jamila, a devout Muslim, is appalled at her father as her father succumbs to drink and drugs and then suddenly remarries, a situation that turns Jamila into a virtual slave to her demanding stepmother. When the stepmother discovers that Jamila is trying to learn to read, she urges her father to abandon the child in Kabul's busy marketplace. Throughout it all, it is the memory of Moore that anchors her and in the end gives Jamila the strength to face her father and stepmother when fate brings them into her life again. What are other benefits of realistic fiction? Monkeytown, the summer of the Scopes trial. The summer of 1925 is one that 15-year-old Frances will always remember. Her small town of Dayton, Tennessee, suddenly grabs worldwide attention when local teacher Johnny Scopes becomes the victim of an enormous publicity stunt that her father has helped to instigate. Scopes, who is also Frances' friend and secret crush, is arrested and put on trial for teaching evolution from a school-approved textbook purchased in Frances' father's drugstore. Although the contrived trial is intended only to bring national attention and tourism to the town, the events that unfold send the teen's world into a spin when she defies her father and defends Scopes. The drama heightens when William Jennings Bryan, H.L. Mencken, Clarence Darrow, and an entourage of reporters and fanatics converge in sleepy Dayton, throwing it into a hotbed of politics, controversy, and peril. Readers usually like a balance between history and fiction in their historical fiction. Anne Perry and Jacqueline Winspear are adult writers of historical fiction that are a little too heavy-handed with the history. I can't read two of their books too close together. Crispin, the Cross of Lead. Ovid sets his story in 14th century England and introduces some of his most unforgettable characters. A 13-year-old orphan, seemingly without a name, and a huge, odd juggler named Bear. At first the boy is known as Asta's son, but when his mother dies, he learns from a priest that his name is really Crispin. He also quickly comes to realize that he is in grave trouble. John Aycliffe, the steward of the manor, reveals himself to be Crispin's mortal enemy and declares the boy a wolf's head, which means he is anyone's prey. Clutching his only possession, a lead cross, Crispin flees his village into a vast new world of opportunity and terror. At his lowest ebb, Crispin meets Bear and reluctantly swears an oath to be his servant. Yet Bear becomes much more than a master. He's Crispin's teacher, protector, and liberator. What other benefits of historical fiction can you think of? Illustrating facts that cannot be represented by photographs is an extensive and important area of work for illustrators of informational books. The illustrations need to be as technically correct as appropriate for the age of the reader. This requires more technique than creativity. The best nonfiction illustration can be both informational and visually stimulating. If pictures that are designed primarily to educate young readers can also enchant and delight, then learning factual information becomes a pleasure. I'm embarrassed to say that in the high school library we had a book titled Little Men in Sports, published in 1971. Not very politically correct. Angel Girl. In a New York Times article dated 12/20/08, an informational book was revealed to be a fake. A Holocaust survivor said his future wife had helped him stay alive while he was imprisoned as a child in a Nazi concentration camp by throwing apples over the fence to him. The story of Herman and Roma Rosenblatt, who said they reunited years later on a blind date in New York, turned out to be fabricated, and over the weekend the publisher of his memoir, Angel at the Fence, The True Story of a Love That Survived, canceled the February release of the book. Customers who had purchased Angel Girl, the child's version, directly from Lerner Publishing Group could contact customer service if they wished to return the book and get their money back. I Want to Be President was first published in 2000. The latest edition was published 2004 during the presidency of George W. Bush. Some things have changed since the book was written, such as on page 43, no person of color has been president. think it's time for an update. Addie Card is 12 years old. She is a spinner in North Portmore Cotton Mill in Vermont. Girls in Mill say she is 10 years. She admitted to me she was 12, that she started during school vacation and knew would stay. This caption is attached to this photograph in the Library of Congress Prints and Photographs collection. Photographer Lewis W. Hine, who lived from 1874 to 1940, was born in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. He studied sociology at Chicago and New York universities, becoming a teacher, then took up photography as a means of expressing his social concerns. In 1908, Hine left his teaching position for a full-time job as an investigative photographer for the National Child Labor Committee, which was then conducting a major campaign against the exploitation of American children. From 1908 to 1912, Hine took his camera across America to photograph children as young as 3 years old, working for long hours, often under dangerous conditions, in factories, mines, and fields. Hine was an immensely talented photographer who viewed his young subjects with the eye of a humanitarian. Hine documented numerous gross violations of laws protecting young children. At many of the locations he visited, youngsters were quickly rushed out of his sight. He was also told youngsters in the mill or factory had just stopped by for a visit or to help their parents. In 1909, he published the first of many photo essays depicting working children at risk. The picture of this book, taken in 1910, was the inspiration for the book Counting on Grace, an historical fiction book written by Elizabeth Winthrop. It is 1910 in Pownell, Vermont. At age 12, Grace and her best friend Arthur must leave school and go to work as doffers on their mother's looms in the mill. Grace's mother is the best worker, fast and powerful, and Grace desperately wants to help her. But she's left-handed, and doffing is a right-handed job. Grace's every mistake costs her mother and the family. She only feels capable on Sundays when she and Arthur receive special lessons from their teacher. Together they write a secret letter to the Child Labor Board about underage children working in Pownell. A few weeks later, a man with a camera shows up. It's the famous reformer Lewis Hine, undercover, collecting evidence for the Child Labor Board. Grace's brief acquaintance with Hine and the photos he takes of her are a gift that changes her sense of herself, her future, and her family's future. In Counting on Grace, we learn that photographer Hine learned to make notes about his subjects using a pencil and a pad while they were out of sight in his pocket. He didn't want the mill owners to realize that he was taking pictures for the Child Labor Board. He gave as his excuse for using children in his pictures that he wanted to give perspective to the size of the equipment used in the mills. Kids at Work, Lewis Hine and the Crusade Against Child Labor. Using the photographer's work throughout, Russell Friedman provides a documentary account of child labor in America during the early 1900s and the role Lewis Hine played in the crusade against it. He offers a look at the man behind the camera, his involvement with the National Child Labor Committee, and the dangers he faced trying to document unjust labor conditions. Charlie Goddard is a 15-year-old boy in Minnesota who lies about his age to join the first volunteers of Minnesota to fight in the Civil War. His wounds and the stress of what he witnessed during the war resulted in his having soldier's heart and dying at age 23. It was called PTSD, was what was called in Civil War was known as soldier's heart. Gary Paulson wrote the historical fiction book Soldier's Heart, being the story of the enlistment and due service of the boy Charlie Goddard in the 1st Minnesota Volunteer, based on this true story. The informational book The Boy's War supports the message of Soldier's Heart. On the cover of the book is the picture of 12-year-old drummer Johnny Clem. Often overlooked are the roles that boys between the ages of 10 and 15 played in the Civil War. The Boys' War provides vignettes of these experiences through excerpts from diaries and letters, which are woven into a basic history of the war. Mindful of the age of his subjects, Ed Sala reads into their memoirs all the naivete, horror, and loneliness of the war years. Daily experiences from outfitting to drumming to fighting are vivid. I heard God talking to me, William Edmondson in his stone carvings. One night in the early 1930s, William Edmondson, the son of former slaves and a janitor in Nashville, Tennessee, heard God speaking to him, and so he began to carve tombstones, bird baths, and stylized human figures whose spirits seemed to emerge fully formed from the stone. Soon Edmondson's talents caught the eye of a prominent member of the art world, and in 1937 he became the first black artist to have a solo exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. The Wall, Growing Up Behind the Iron Curtain by Peter Siss. In an autobiographical picture book, Siss pairs his remarkable artistry with journal entries, historical context, and period photography to create a powerful account of his childhood in Cold War-era Prague. Public displays of loyalty compulsory. Children are encouraged to report on their families and fellow students. Parents learn to keep their opinions to themselves. Text along the bottom margin reveals young Siss's own experience. He didn't question what he was being told. Then he found out there were things he wasn't told. The secret police, with tidy suits and pig faces, intrude into every drawing, watching and listening. As Siss grows to manhood, Eastern Europe discovers the Beatles, and the Prague Spring of 1968 promises liberation and freedom. Instead, Soviet tanks roll in, returning the city to its previous restrictive climate. Peter Siss is an internationally renowned artist and Caldecott Honors winner. Reading biographies is a great way for children to learn how other people face their challenges and how they deal with or overcome them. Reading biographies helps them to learn how to write their own stories. Always live your life with your biography in mind. It's a quote from Marisha Pessel. And remember, nobody's perfect.